All right, welcome to the May 1st, 2026 work session of the Greensboro City Council. A few members, I think Mr. Allen will be here. Ms. Parker is here, and we will move forward. Mr. City Manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor, members of council. I feel like I need to stand up because we've got a lot of things in the room. So today will be a little bit longer. So with that, we have a few refreshments for you. And just feel free to either get up and walk or let me know, and we'll get them to you. But the reason we want to take a little bit more time, we've got two presentations. The first, we're going to turn it over to ACM Larry Davis. Director Jamire Waterman will navigate through our compensation. We'll have some conversation around that. We know that has been a big part of what you all communicate to me, and also a big part of what our staff is looking for. The second half of our presentation today will highlight some of the discussion. This is our kind of our second shot at talking about bonds. This is more materialized. You got more information. You got a few emails from me that highlight a list, and we try to categorize them or group them into areas such as, we want to look at bonds in the shape of transportation needs, park and recreation, or some of the other areas. I know the fire department has a number of things, and we'll take some time to go through those. You see the boards that are up. This is, again, going to be a style where we will navigate through. You also have what we really dug in and worked on at the retreat. This was the first chance to really put Vision 36 into action without the decision-making matrix. To help out with that, Tiffany Shelton is going to help us facilitate that portion to navigate through, and we'll enjoy and have a good time. So ACM Larry Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. First presentation today, Jamire Waterman and John Decker are going to lead. This is in keeping with kind of our weekly meetings we've been having, where we've been trying to touch on pretty significant items or issues that will be part of your consideration for 26-27. This one deals with compensation. It speaks somewhat to 26-27 itself and what we are currently considering for the manager's recommended budget that's being worked on concurrently. And then some of it is more contextual in nature, just to give you a better sense of what part of the budget compensation makes up, and what are some of the primary components within, and how that term is much broader than it's sometimes considered, that it does go well beyond your actual salary, but includes a lot of other factors as well. So with that, Jamire and John, I'll let you begin.
Well, I'll just start off here providing a little bit of context. So we often hear that our most valuable asset is our employees, and you can see it reflected in our budget here. About 41% of the total budget is for compensation, about 30% just for salaries and wages, and an additional 12%. And then in the general fund specifically, we're looking at about 60% of the overall general fund budget is for compensation. So again, about 42% of the entire general fund is for salaries and wages, and about 18% is for benefits.
Good afternoon. So this slide highlights the compensation components of the manager's recommended budget, which we'll cover in more detail as we go on in the presentation. Like our residents, continue to feel the impacts of inflation on their households. So these recommendations are designed to keep employees and their families from falling behind. And of course, we also want to be competitive for new talent. The first thing I want to point out is that the minimum salary for all benefit positions increases 6.25% to $44,200 annually, or $21.25 per. This continues our progress towards a $25 per hour living wage goal. The general, executive, fire, and police exempt salary structures will increase by 4%. That means the pay ranges for those salary structures will increase and give our employees more room to grow over time. Most employees in the organization will also receive a 2.5% cost of living adjustment. And they'll also have the opportunity for additional performance-based increases. Departments will have the discretion to award performance bonuses, but they may not exceed a 1.5% average merit. Just a quick note on some of this terminology. When I say exempt or non-exempt, I'm really referring to whether or not they are eligible for overtime. So when you think about police exempt and fire exempt, we're talking about the managers of police and fire who are not eligible for overtime pay. The non-exempt are your rank and file police and fire sworn personnel. They are on step plans. And speaking of step plans, those employees will receive one step movement, which equates to a 4% increase, provided that they have at least met performance expectations over the prior year. In addition, employees in roster positions are the positions that work fewer than 1,000 hours per calendar year. They work for wages and no benefits. These employees will also receive an increase to their minimum wage by 4.6% up to $18 per hour. Any questions about this slide? And if you have questions or comments at any time, of course, stop. But we'll go in greater detail. Yes.
Tim,
Can you explain the, why those folks on a step do not get cost of living, question one?
Okay.
And number two, we had talked about, general employees that were previously on a step plan, coming off step plan. Can you tell us how the structure adjustment or whatever works for that?
Thank you. Great question. So the journey for both those employees on the step plan and those who are not are roughly will end up in roughly the same place. When it comes to step increases, those increases are predetermined and they're built in with a 4% increase. And so for those employees who are not on a step plan, they have the opportunity for a 2.5% COLA and a merit that will average 1.5%, roughly equal to 4% increase over the next fiscal year. So the journey is about the same. Of course, there could be, but with a built-in 4% step increase, it sort of takes away the need for also a cost of living allowance, if that makes sense.
But
Now-
the general and the general employees,
So the structure adjustment does not come with any pay increase. I'm going to go into further detail. So the
Okay.
only pay increases that will typically happen for those employees would be 2.5 plus 1.5 for a total of 4%. And the same is true also for the step.
I think for clarity's sake, it would be better to specify that in detail. I think it's misleading because certainly from the way this looks, everybody gets a 4% increase and a cost of living increase, except for fire and police step.
Thank you for that. I have a slide later to go into detail about what the structure adjustment is and what it means.
Okay.
But the only employees who would get an increase as a result of that change would be those employees whose salary falls below the new range minimum. So you might have some employees who are on the lower end of the pay range today, and once that goes, they would be below that new range minimum. And so we would bring them up. But the overwhelming majority of employees are either going to get the 2.5% COLA and have an opportunity for a merit averaging of 1.5%, so that there's parity in essence between the employees on the step plan and those who are not.
I think that it'll be, well, we can wait till
We can
the,
keep going.
yeah, it's for the structure adjustment, but there.
solve the problem of when we try to adjust for one group, but then the other group is left behind. So
Right. Yeah.
so it'll be good for you to talk about it more, Ms. Structure.
I will. And Councilmember Thurman, I lost track of your second question.
General step plan.
Yes. Cause I lost track of it too.
Okay. You're correct. So just for background, for those who may not be aware, for many years, the only employees in our organization that are on and a step plan is essentially a salary structure that has predetermined steps so that an employee can look at it and they can forecast out next year. If I perform well, I'm going to make X. The year after that, I'm going to make Y, so on and so forth. As opposed to those not on a step plan, their salary varies based on performance, but management has some discretion on the exact amount of pay increases that they receive. Historically, only our sworn police and sworn fire had been on step plans. 4 or so years ago, there was some conversation around moving a portion of our general employees, for lack of a better framing, I would say a lot of our field workers, to a similar step plan. The rationale at that time was some employees felt that the merit increases were not always fair. They felt that supervisors and managers were playing favorites with merit increases. Now, we would conduct equity analysis after merit increases to see if we could flag any outliers or any evidence of discriminatory raises, and the data never suggested that, but nevertheless, that was the perception that some had. So at that time, council took the decision to move those employees into their very own step plan. Well, 4 years on, we now hear from employees that there's not enough differentiation between performance, meaning I'm a rock star employee. Today I do my work, I do it above and beyond. And those who maybe don't do that extra, we both get the same increase. And so after a lot of reflection and internal dialogue, we made the decision that it's better to move those employees back to the general salary structure where they came from. And really culturally, it's just a different context between the rank and file police department and the rank and file fire. The way that they work together, the job, as opposed to in the general employee step plan, you had employees from different departments all over the organization doing different kinds of work. It just didn't fit as well. So our plan is at the end of this fiscal year, those employees who are in the general employee step plan will in fact go back to the general salary structure. Any other questions about this slide? Okay. What was happening? There we go. Before we dig into the budget recommendations in detail, I thought I would share just very quickly some workforce context. Unemployment in North Carolina and in Guilford County, you can see here, is roughly consistent with what economists would consider full employment. We are, I can tell you at least anecdotally, in a very tight labor market and competition for talent. Is that my time? All right, any questions? Currently, at least as of this week, we have 2,998 full-time employees, 61 part-time benefited employees, and we have 595 roster employees. For our benefited workforce, those full-time and part-time, on average, they have been with the city for almost 11 years, which really speaks to their loyalty to this community and to this organization, ability and to the expertise that exists in our workforce. There are some risks, of course. That means we have a lot of folks who are probably nearing the end of their tenure, and so there's a risk of a loss of institutional knowledge. Also, for those newer workers in the workplace, they might experience, or at least the perception of a lack of opportunities for advancement or slow advancement. Despite the fact that we are in a very tough labor market, we do a good job of filling positions. We have a goal to fill every vacant position within 60 days. And on average, we are just meeting that goal at 59 days. And again, once we get folks in the door, they want to stay. And so our voluntary turnover is less than 5%, which is really outstanding. So back to the minimum wage increases. This slide tracks the progress that we have made in maintaining a living wage, and it all forward through 2030. We are planning annual minimum increases of at least 6% each year through 2030. This reflects a sustained multi-year approach rather than just a one-time fix. The recommended budget does raise the minimum salary from $41,600, which is roughly $20 per hour, to $44,200 or $21.25. Currently today, there are 25 benefited employees that are below $44,200. So for those employees, we will make sure once this is implemented that they are raised to that new minimum.
Say that number again?
175 benefited employees out of a little over 3,000. Roster employees, while many of them are students, retirees, or those just seeking part-time work, they are a big part of our operation. And so we wanted to make sure that they too can have wages that needs. And this budget will raise the minimum roster wage up from $17.21 to $18 per hour.
I want to make a note there, Jemiah. This is something, when we talk about internal feedback, this is a big thing. I know Parks and Recreation and a few other areas, they really rely on their roster employees through different seasonal jobs, have really been pushing for this type. So this is a really big thing for those departments that rely on.
And I'm sorry.
Hugh has
Just a quick question. Are you going to address compression after this?
With rosters or just
Okay,
in
just
general?
with the minimum wage here going from 20 to 21.5.
So there,
Is there a future slide on that?
no, I will tell you that the relative number of folks impacted by that change, 175, it's around 5%.
I'm not even, well, I'm concerned about them, yes. I'm concerned about the ones who are just above that, who are here and they're not moving. Are we saying that they're not moving?
So they will move. Again, most of them they'll get the 2.5% COLA, which is an automatic thing. And they'll also be eligible for merit-based increases, which will vary, but could be an additional 1.5% or more or less. So they too will be moving, but only those employees, those 175 who are primarily brand new into the organization will receive that extra amount to make sure that they are above this threshold of 44,200.
Right, and those who are going, the 175 who are below the 44.2, are they getting the COLA?
They do.
So they're getting the COLA and they're getting the bump. Those who are just above just get the COLA.
So many of them, that 175, once they get a COLA and once they get a merit increase, they will already be for 44,200.
Right, they're already above it.
Only those who remain below the additional support to get them to 44,200.
Before, when we adjusted previous years, we adjusted police and fire and we accounted for compression. Didn't we make adjustments to everybody above that line so that?
You're absolutely right. In the ideal scenario, especially if we're going to make very impactful changes to pay, we do want to address internal equity concerns and make sure that we're not causing that wage compression where you have new workers making the same more than those longer tenures. The scale, the magnitude of this change is much smaller, and we don't think it justifies a major compression strategy, but you're correct, your memory is right.
Unless you're sitting just above 44.2.
And so many of those employees, they too are also brand new. These employees who are even in or around this area, again, they are newer in their career, newer in their and so if you were here 6 months ago or 9 months ago, it's very possible that someone new after this change is going to be making right on your heels. And so we made the determination that that level of compression is probably beyond our ability to really address at this point.
Let me ask a side question here. What is the comprehensive cost of $1 increase for these 2,900 employees? Have you calculated that?
I haven't,
Because I know that with police and fire, we're talking about what?
It's
500,
about-
600?
more than
So,
that.
but it's a smaller number than the 2,900. Or 3,000. What is the dollar cost of this change? Or I guess it's not even impacting everyone because
No,
it's
it doesn't.
135.
Right, and it'll be a much smaller number because these 175 employees, they're gonna get a COLA. Some of them will also get merits of different percentage. By the time we have the new minimum, many of them will already be over that new minimum. We're just establishing a floor to make sure that, as people come to the organization, we're maintaining a living wage for them.
And it just seems like to me that if our employees are our most valuable resource, then we find a way. And we look at the 21.5, and granted, when I joined council, I think that number was 15.
It was the fight for 15.
Yeah.
5 to 15. And so to be at 21.5 is great, but we also know that the living wages are much higher. Some say in the range of 25.
Right.
So I'm concerned about those of our employees that we count on when it's freezing outside and they're in the ditch, patching up a water main. That we kind of leave them as collateral damage. That, well, tough it out. You're 44, but they really should have more. And we really should be doing more with compression to push everybody up, I think. If there's anything we would do, or we should do, account for an increase in property taxes, I think taking care of our people is the primary thing. So I would like to see an adjustment for compression so that if I'm sitting at 44,201, I don't see everybody else coming up at me, and now I have that feeling maybe I leave, and we take that 5% attrition and move it up to 10% because people aren't happy.
Thank you for that feedback. I will just also add, because I didn't get a chance to share this with you. Roster employees, 457 of them are below the $18 minimum that we will be moving to. So a significant number will foresee an increase to that.
And that used to be what, 12, 13 or something?
For rosters,
For rosters.
this year currently is $17.21. It's going up 4% to 18. But it wasn't too long ago when it was $7.25 the minimum wage.
Right.
Sure. Okay, thank you for the feedback. Talk more about the salary structure adjustments and exactly what that means. This budget, again, will increase the salary structures for the general, the executive, police, and fire exempt classifications by 4%. This is a pay range adjustment, not a pay increase. Employees whose salaries already fall within the adjusted range will see no change to their pay. Only those employees whose salaries fall below the new range minimum will receive an increase to that minimum. Example is the G13 pay grade, which includes positions like librarians, also includes positions like crew supervisors. Every pay grade has three important milestones. One is the minimum, which is the floor, the absolute minimum that an employee can be paid. The second is the midpoint, or what we sometimes call a control point. That is the value of, we would expect a fully proficient employee earn in that job. And then, of course, the third milestone is the range maximum, which no matter how good your performance is, no matter how much experience you have, as a stewardship standpoint, there simply has to be a maximum amount that we're going to pay for that particular piece of work, and that's the range maximum. So when we implement these structural adjustments, each of those milestones will be increased by 4%, as you can see here, highlighted at the bottom. And only those employees who are below 48,691 would receive a pay increase to 48,691. We adjust our pay structures on a regular basis to keep our pay ranges competitive with the market. It helps us to be able to attract people to the organization. And it also, to Councilmember Holston's point, it helps us to be able to continue to reward the people that we have so that they don't cap out on their earning potential. Okay? Any questions?
So if I'm earning 61,603 and I'm a general employee,
Yes.
then I'll get a 2.5 cost of living
Yes.
adjustment and up to 1.5 This says permanent performance bonus, but is that an hourly rate or an actual bonus?
So let me help with that. The 2.5%
Yeah,
is applied to the employee's current salary.
which is 61,603.
Yes.
Okay,
The 1.5% merit, and again, it can be more or less than 1.5%. That's the difference between a step plan and a merit increase.
Right.
Departments have that discretion. That is applied against the control point. And so if you are an employee you're on the bottom end of the pay range, a 1.5% increase actually ends up being percent. If you are another employee, but you're in the upper end of the pay range, a 1.5% increase ends up being more or less than 1.5% actually. Because as you progress through your pay range, we try to slow down your pay to keep your pay from accelerating beyond an amount that we can afford to pay or that makes sense to pay. So 1.5% merit is applied to that control point or midpoint.
But Councilmember, the term bonus can applies one time only. This becomes part of your new base pay.
then we need to change this to adjustment, not bonus, in the word.
Okay.
On your sheet, because a bonus means a one-time payment, it doesn't mean that I'm changing my pay rate.
Thank you for that. It's a merit. We have two ways to reward performance: merit increases or step increases, and it applies to the base salary. Thank you. Any more questions? So I wanted to also just briefly mention that while salary structure adjustments help to keep our pay competitive, we also rely on labor market data to help us validate where we stand. So every 2 years, we engage an independent consultant to conduct a labor market survey. In off years, we also conduct a smaller focus just on public safety, Guilford Metro 911, fire and police. That helps us to ensure that we have current public safety data every year. We work with department leaders across the organization to identify what we call benchmark jobs. And these are positions that are common. They exist across many organizations. And we want to compare this broad section of jobs, complete picture of our competitiveness. So the consultant will take real world salary data from our peers and analyze it to find the 50th percentile of salary data. That's the point at which half of our peers pay more and half of our peers pay less. And so just by way of example, if for purposes, let's say we were looking at our city clerk position, 5 peer cities, the consultant would reach out to those 5 organizations and say, hey, how much are you paying your city clerk? The consultant would rank those salaries from the highest to lowest. And the third highest salary is the 50th percentile of the city clerk pay data. That number, that 50th percentile, is the figure that we use to anchor our positions. And so that ends up becoming our point or pay range control point for each of the pay ranges that exist in our salary structure. This helps us to stay competitive with our peers, but also maintaining, of course, fiscal stewardship.
Do we then adjust for longevity, or how does longevity for experience level? So if we're going with the clerk example, if our peer cities, is this an entry level for a clerk position, or is this the highest level they pay, or how do you negotiate? I'm paying my clerk X dollars because they've been with me for 10 years and they have great experience, versus this other city that's paying Y dollars because their person's brand new. How do we adjust for that in that middle?
That's a great point. So I use 5 just because the math is easier that way to look at the third out of
Right.
5. But in reality, we have many, many more peers. So in this year's 2026 labor market survey, we had 22. And a lot of the positions have multiple people in them. So with a city clerk example, of course, most organizations only have. But for other positions like police officer or firefighter, there'll be dozens. And so the more data that you have, the more you're better able to control for those variances that someone was new in the job or someone's been there for 40 years. But when you have a small sample size, you can get outliers and end up making bad decisions on a limited amount of data. So our consultant has a threshold that they use to make sure before they report any data back to us that there's a sufficiently statistically significant data points for us to base that decision on. But you're right, some people will be new, some people will be older or more experienced, but it all kind of comes out in the wash with this amount of data.
Thank you.
And so, as you see here are the current labor market peers that we compare ourselves to. Most of them are North Carolina cities and towns. There are some regional cities, some in far-flung places. They're there for a distinct reason, in particular to make sure that we draw appropriate comparisons for some of the unique positions that we have in our organization. But for the most part, the data is current and is very relevant to us in our geographic area. Our consultant completed their analysis of this data earlier, sorry to say this one, but this is the first, earlier in April, and our team is now data to try to develop recommendations. And my understanding is that the plan is to bring those findings to council for evaluation and action. Okay. So performance-based increases, not bonuses. Thank you for that. There are 2 main ways in which this organization rewards performance. Through merit increases and also through step increases. The recommended budget at this point includes merit increases for employees in the general, executive, fire exempt, and police exempt salary structures. The departmental average or budget is 1.5%, but again, departments have discretion over individual amounts. Some employees might receive 0, some might receive 3, 4, or 5, or anywhere in between, so long as they don't go over budget. As I mentioned earlier, merit increases are based on the control point, is individual salary. That's very intentional in that we want to get employees at the lower end of the pay range up to the control point faster. And then as you've been in the job for a longer time and you are now approaching the maximum, we want to slow down your pay so that you don't run out of room to grow. Step increases, on the other hand, differ from merits in one key way. The amount of the increase is predetermined. It's all or nothing. If you meet expectations, you get 4%. And if you don't, you get. As we mentioned earlier, the general employee step plan, those employees will be moving back to the general salary structure and will once again be eligible for merit increases. Any questions about this?
And who is general again?
The general salary structure basically includes anyone that's not police and fire. Executive includes department heads and above.
So anyone who's not police and fire, so this includes those who are on hourly wages.
Yes.
The 1 point,
Well, not rosters.
Not
not the rosters, but the
Yeah.
29,995.
Everyone else, yeah. If you're in libraries, if you're in water resources, solid waste and recycling.
Are they eligible for the up to 1.5?
It can be more than
This is
1.5.
performance based.
It just
Well,
needs to-
sorry, that's right. On average, based upon work unit, I can give somebody 4 and somebody 0.
Exactly.
Okay,
Other questions?
all right.
And then cost of living adjustments, we sort of hit on this, and I'll just quickly say that employees in these structures will be eligible for both the COLA and the merit. They're not mutually exclusive. we based the amount of the COLA to roughly approximate inflation. We use the same inflation indicator that the Social Security Administration uses to determine its COLA, and inflation is percent. And so by going with 2.5%, that left us ample room in the budget to be able to award meaningful performance increases as well. So all of these groups will receive an automatic 2.5% COLA. Okay. While a lot of what we've talked about today has focused on base salary, which is of course important, we are making really deliberate efforts to make sure that employees understand and appreciate the full spectrum of their compensation. And so you'll see listed here all the different special pay types, not all, let me correct myself, nowhere near all, but some of the more common ones, pay types and incentives and benefits that employees receive over and above just their base pay. Each year, we deliver personal compensation statements to employees, and I provided a hard copy to you at your place so that you can see a real life example of one. This employee is a solid waste operator, a heavy equipment operator in our solid waste and recycling department. And it just goes to illustrate the value of the total compensation. This employee's base salary is just over $60,000. But when you take into account all of the different benefits and the value of the paid leave and the insurance, you can see on the second page, this employee's total compensation is over $114,000. We provide these statements to employees each year, roughly after tax time.
Is this employee considered to be hourly or salary?
Salary. This is a salaried employee. Now, they're non-exempt, which means overtime, they get time and a half. You just have to do some math, but yes, they're salaried. Any other questions about this? Okay. So, since nearly half of our full-time benefited positions are in fire and in police, we thought it was worth highlighting some of the incentives specific to those departments. This slide focuses on the fire department, which of course offers certification pay, offers incentives for working extra shifts. There's some deferred compensation incentives, signing bonuses, and other additional pay for serving on specialized teams. This slide shows some of the similar incentives that our police department offers its team members. You can, of course, read that. And there are some incentives that they have in common. Educational incentive for educational attainment up to $5,000. There's a military signing bonus because of the culture of these two organizations. They're paramilitary organizations, and so armed services is a fertile recruitment ground for them, and so we have a way of incentivizing that. And so we just wanted to highlight that. I see a lot of things. Yes.
I just wanted to ask about the separation allowance for firefighters.
Okay.
It's not on here, so.
Oh,
I have some.
I'm giving just an overview of the current.
The current.
Yes.
Yeah, Adam, same thing.
Right there.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Really, you said, I see this one side for the fire incentives, one side for the police incentives, one for what they have in common.
Yes.
It would be nice to have a separate section saying what they have in difference.
Mhm.
That would be really helpful.
Okay. I think the main one that you've already heard of is the separation allowance. That is a state benefit that sworn police officers receive. So that would
Or
be,
the 401k,
so I can address that. There is a state 401k plan, again, mandated by the state, that requires the city to make a 5% contribution into that account on behalf of those police officers. The city of Greensboro voluntarily, many years ago, before I even got to the city made the decision to provide parity on that benefit. So all other than police receive 3.25% into the 401A. And for firefighters who make a 2% contribution into their 457s, the city then voluntarily will match 1.75% into the 401A, thereby bringing them up also to 5%. The main difference is for firefighters, they do have to make a 2% contribution to get that 1.75, but
I agree with April,
I'm
that
sorry.
I'd like to see a comparison chart,
Mm-hmm.
because to, like Councilmember Holston's point, when we talk about similarity of jobs.
Yeah.
I don't see a difference in public safety is public safety.
Yeah.
And so we need to ensure that, it mirrors that when we are compensating. So, is there a way that you could give us kind of a mirrored approach of, so we can see how to get there to where we are comparable?
yes, we can highlight the difference with separation allowance and the difference with the deferred comp. Those might be two areas.
For any difference.
Retirement
Well-
plan, I'd like to see the differences.
I will say there are many differences. So I
We
mean,
want to
because
see them.
We wanna
they're
see 'em.
different pieces of work. So some things might not be applicable.
That's
right?
okay. Let's just list them.
So,
Yeah, I think, I think, we also have to look at what's possible, around the risks that they take.
Mhm.
When we're talking about just the equipment that they use shortens, their lifespan. Sorry, I have to say that while y'all are sitting here, but it's like, it's the truth. And so I don't really see anything that we're doing to compensate for what they're
Long-term
sacrificing. Yeah.
And I know this is the current benefits. Are we going to have this discussion about separation allowance, comparable benefit for fire?
that's above my pay grade, but I will tell you this.
I think we've already expressed this.
That was gonna be the words.
It's not the first
Is that-
conversation.
I'm certainly hearing an interest to explore the differences and to Councilmember Black's point, to map out a way to possibly address that.
I think the desire ultimately is, and the goal, I would speak for a bunch of us, is that, the fire the same as police ultimately.
Anything else on this? Yes.
Can you explain, the death benefit
Yeah.
and age and how many years of service is it? How does that work? Is it death benefit?
Right. It's not an incentive, it's a benefit. I'm not trying to.
Yeah, it's just definitely not an incentive.
Where's Matt?
Can you explain how that works? I mean, cause I see the death benefit on police, $5,000 here and
Yeah.
2 times salary there, the same, and
Yes.
can you, I just don't understand
It's
that.
state differences. So where the city is concerned, the death benefit is exactly the same. It's 2
times
times the salary.
Okay,
But if you are a sworn police officer and active at the time of your death, there is a state and paid for benefit of $5,000.
so the state pays that
Yes.
$5,000.
Yes. And as far as the retirement differences, yes, a police officer can retire at an earlier time with a reduced benefit, earlier than firefighters or earlier than any other city employee. And that's the way that the state retirement system has formulated the eligibility criteria for police. That's not something we will ever be in a position to change. That has to.
It would be helpful if we could learn more about that, not necessarily from what we want to change, but we also have the ability to lobby the state for changes.
Yeah, right.
And I think if we fully understood that, then we could look at it from that perspective as well, and that's why we want to see
The difference.
the difference.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
And I think too, that would be helpful, you know, if something is out of the norm like that is paid by the state, just something in.
Yes, that's what. Because I thought we paid
Yeah.
that 5,000. I
Anybody
didn't realize that.
else before we move
That's
on?
good, that's good.
That's good, yeah, okay.
And that, I'll turn it back over to John.
Yeah, thank you. So I did want to highlight some of the cost drivers as we enter 26, 27. we do have recurring, cost adjustments based on a lot of what I've already covered here. I just want to give you a range of some of those impacts that we're facing in the incoming budget. So for those COLAs, merits, and steps, somewhere dollars addition for the budget next year. Again, a large portion of our budget goes to personnel compensation, so it's going to have a direct impact on that. Over the last few years, we've also seen normal overtime usage in police, fire, and some other departments. We don't think that we're operationally going to change that, so we want to budget for the overtime we're using. We've essentially lost any, I'll say slack, but it wasn't really slack. It was prudent budgeting in our salaries and benefits been taken up over the last few years for various reasons. So we need to address what's in the budget for covering those. And that would be the same for premium pay and roster wages as well. As we relied on those more, that this reflects what we've been spending over the last few years, and unlikely to reduce operations to cover that. Similarly, on the benefit side, we're looking at significant increases. We've talked a lot about the health insurance we're facing as a city, and quite frankly, everybody else is as well. We're looking at somewhere between $4 and $5 million additional impact just for health coverage next year from the employer side. Similar benefit is the state mandated rate for pension contributions. So that chart there highlights the changes over the last few years. You can see for general employees, it's been about 11% increase over the last 3 years. Again, projecting into what the rate is for 26, about 13% for police officers. And then the highlighting below the rate for employees is essentially stayed, well, I think not essentially has stayed the same since it was established at 6%. So again, those increases will result in about a $5 to $6 million increase in the budget next year just to cover those retirement rate increases.
$25 million
Just for compensation.
for compensation.
And the health insurance piece, and that is the net increase, or that is the total cost?
Finished. These are all just the net increases of what the budget cost driver might be for next year for these categories.
And I will say to your point, Councilmember Holston, we are working internally and with our consultants you met a month ago to come up with some cost containment strategies, because we really will make some recommendations here soon so that employees and their families will have ample opportunity to consider those changes before open enrollment in October and November.
So we're saying that just in general, that the net increase in health insurance is $5 million without any material changes. I mean, that's just the cost of doing business is $5 million more just in health benefits.
Yes.
For our staff, then another $5 to $6 million increase just because of the pension. It's $11 million. We haven't done anything.
Just to maintain.
And if you take a look at the total comp statement that July handed out, just to kind of put these into real dollars, you see for this one employee for the year that this was pulled, we made an almost $8,800 contribution to the state retirement system and over $12,000 contribution to the health on behalf of that one system.
So it's all taking care of people in their futures, though.
Absolutely, of course, but it is.
It's just the cost.
It's incredibly expensive and getting more so on the daily basis.
I think it's important for people to see that, their costs rose and so did ours.
Yeah.
So any questions about any of this before we transition to bonds?
Just one more quick question. Upper right, green, general and executive. So we're talking about someone in the CMO's office is going to see a 4% structure adjustment. So everybody gets a 4% against the control point, or what is it?
Yeah, I still haven't done a sufficient job of explaining structure adjustments, I can tell. So the 4% structure adjustment really just means the pay range for that job goes up 4%. If you're in the new range, you don't get anything. It's only if your salary is below that new minimum would you get raised to that. So it's very unlikely that anybody in the city manager's office is going to do anything. I'm sorry, Larry, that was not directed to me. We're talking about service bonus.
We always pick on Larry. Yeah,
So there's really no dollars attached to that.
We did not structure this chart correctly. Do not add 4 plus 2.
well, that's what,
Yeah.
you know, that's what we're doing.
We're gonna change that.
And also that performance bonus is a
We're gonna
one-time
take, we're
hit.
gonna take this version down and replace it immediately. Because
Absolutely.
those 3 items are not added.
Okay,
The only adding that you do is the 2.5 and the 1.5 in comparison to the 4. And so roughly all employees.
Denise, then anybody else?
I think that's the point. Well, I was trying to think about maybe another way to explain it. I wonder if, cause the band of employees overall, the group of employees, like the 3,000 roughly, they all sort of separate across a certain number of grades and levels. And isn't it possible for you to sort of show a grouping of in the movement that they make?
Yeah, we have, if you were to go out on the city's website now, people in culture department, you'll see all of the salary structures listed there, and you can see from, I think it's G7 maybe, all the way up to G25, and you can see the pay ranges. All of them together will shift upwards 4%. And that gives all of us, no matter where we are in the organization, room to grow. You know, that max salary is now 4% higher than it used to be.
And then my understanding of my understanding of the structure adjustment is that it adjusts so that we are never dropping out. So if we didn't move the structure adjustment, but we kept adjusting people, they would basically come out of that range.
Exactly
So
right.
the structure adjustment is sort of a guide that stays with the movement of the
Individual pay
population.
would go up, but the competitiveness of the pay range just gets worse and worse over time if you're not.
Right, so everything has to move together so it doesn't get out of whack, because in the past, often organizations, and it's not just this one, would move people, but the whole system wouldn't move, and so they would stop and say, hey, we're getting really compressed, and we haven't made adjustments, so we now need to move everything. And then, but now you're doing it all together,
Yes.
so that you don't have that.
yeah, so it's a salary range.
The salary range.
We're just, I think most folks are probably more familiar with the term
Yeah.
salary range. And we know that we don't get paid the salary range, it's just
That's a good
the
note.
target that we're looking at. And to have that as a number, and I'm sure everybody's gonna add back on.
Well, this is our first budget season, so like May 1st, we're like locking in and breathing these things. And I respect our city manager, but I also just, having a conversation about folks without folks. I definitely appreciate what you guys are offering us, but I want to lean into the experts in the room and just offer any staff or
We'll,
just as something.
We don't,
Normally-
not a work session, but they express to the city manager and their assistants, any concerns they have.
Okay. Thanks for.
No worries.
Thank you for your.
well, before we leave this topic, I do want to this is, to your point, this is our opportunity to make sure we're capturing, reflecting, and I'm fiercely typing and writing some notes here from just listening, trying to capture. And obviously over the next few weeks, up to the point that I'll make the first presentation
I see.
of my recommendation will be the 19th. But then, the work has started, but we continue to intensify the work. What are a few things that I want to go down the list and you tell me if I'm missing anything that we need to follow up on. I think Larry just highlighted, I think the structuring or the way this particular slide outlines what those adjustments are. You asked for a comparative list of what the list of benefits that are provided for both police and fire. I think I've heard a few comments about the previous request, and I think we need to provide some definitive articulation of what the supplement may look like. Grouped into that area of comparisons of the benefit for both. Anything else that I'm missing that we need to make sure that we capture, bring back, or identify?
Going back to the hourly employees, looking at that compression just above the 21-25, what can we do to make sure that they're seen?
I just want to point out and I'm not debating with you at all, I want to be very clear about that, but, if you address those employees who are just above 5, then you have the employees who are at 22.
But we did it for police and fire.
When you address the employees at 22, you have the employees who are at 23. And so that's the trick that, when you start to address compression created by this change, where do you stop?
Yeah, I understand that, but we did look at that for police and fire, and these are our employees also.
So maybe we need to come back and just give like a more holistic view of when, 'cause I remember a couple times when we did. And several times when you address those structures in police and fire, you may address, I'm looking over at the firefighters, so, you know, if you are that engineer and you're just below, you know, a captain or an assistant chief, and there's compression there, then we address those. So it may not have been the whole structure that we addressed those areas that we identified, so.
But it does sound like that we're not looking at anybody else above
In
the
previous,
21.5.
in previous times, exactly what you're speaking to, Councilman. Typically, it's when we were making significant range adjustments, where we might be moving firefighters 10 or 12%. Well, you couldn't just do that and then leave the rest of the department alone. I mean, you had to account for that throughout the entire department, or you've done more harm than good or something like that. The specific question you asked, we talked about trying to calculate that and giving. We'll do it now. But the reason we didn't do it this time is because, as Jemiah said, we don't know how many of those 175 will actually be below the minimum after they get their raise. Now, we'll go back and make some estimates, a third, a half, 2/3 of it. But most of them won't be below that minimum anymore after they get their raise. But we'll go back and try to determine a reasonable estimate of how many will still be below the minimum. And therefore, we'll need to get another extra bump just to get it. Probably not be a significant amount of money, and that's why we're not considering a compression strategy along with it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Still, we're talking about the 175. We're not talking about those that are just above the 175, and that's my point.
Yeah.
I want to at least look at those who are above 175, above the 21.25, and see what the impact is, what the spread is, what the difference is,
And we
what
can
the compression
it
is.
We think it will be minimal, but we will confirm or deny it.
And then one more thing,
Spreadsheets are great.
to the point about the benefits. I understand that some of the benefits are fairly specific, like the military, but I'd like to see a common sizing of these benefits. Just keep it simple. You know, was it KISS? Keep it simple. So that we're not, you know, having to get these charts and graphs, and you're different from here, you're different from here, but they get their paycheck from the very same place.
I agree. I trust me, as someone who's involved in administering them, I agree. But you know, all of these incentives were business led. I mean, people in the business said, "Hey, we need a tool to incentivize people who have to work nights." The firefighters said, "Hey, we need a tool to incentivize people to work day shift." We need all of these different things, and so that's how we have approaching now 200 different pay codes for all kinds of incentives and special pay types, holiday pay, because there were business.
I need to also kind of give Jemiah some credit here, and I'm looking over at the chief. A couple of years ago, we had challenges with making sure we were retaining and providing different incentives or being competitive in recruiting, because there are other organizations around us that the chief and the police chief compete with to recruit and retain. So a lot of what you see is a result of several different folks working the different leaders, Jemiah, to be more aggressive in some of the package of things that we provide.
And I don't disagree that there are some unique circumstances that we need to account for in different work groups, but where we can, I think it needs to be the same. And, you know, comparable, you all live in the world, you can tell us more so what they are. Those that are special, they're special. If they're not special, make a comment.
Good. Thank
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You won't, gonna take 5 weeks.
And then-
Keep going.
Well, I
Keep
think
going.
we all want to keep going.
Keep going, I'm good. Salty stuff. I gotta grab a snack. Are there any drinks in the room? Any drinks in the room?
Going, what's going twice?
Take 2 more. Three minutes. Yeah. So I wanted some something.
It's Friday afternoon. And, I wanna try to get this thing going before, anybody turns into a pumpkin on me and starts, freaking out. So this next part, I'm gonna ask Tiffany Shelton, tremendous amount of work. I think I sent you all some of the work she's done internally with our staff. And again, she's done a lot of the work that you see, is the work that she's doing behind the scenes. So I'm gonna turn it over to her to start talking about this next segment. And Larry, do you want to prompt?
No, that's perfect. We'll jump right in, we will. So the purpose of the rest of the time that we'll spend this afternoon is really to dig in and get some prioritization going around the bond project. So you had some homework, and so I want everybody to breathe in, breathe out, and layers of what that might look like. We're going to bring it into the room and have some really good conversation this afternoon. So I did want to pause to share a few quick slides with you before we dig in so we can get on the same page about how we want to spend our time. But please, at any time, observations, questions, Tiffany, slow down, we can do that. So first, we do want to do some prioritization. Let's get some groups and some tiers of these projects. Oh, I saw a hand. Okay, I saw a hand. I'm trying to see a hand and then. The second one is some next steps, some directives for where we go from here. And a really important thing that we wanted to lift is this decision-making matrix that is in place now. We want to get a little feedback because this is new for you all. It's new for the organization. So while we use it, we also want to know how did it work for you. So in an informal sense, if we're going to use it going forward and what that looks like, if we need to make some adjustments so that it fits the work that you're trying to do. Some commitments, anytime we're doing facilitated work like this, we do want to pause and just get it all on the same page. So what that looks like for this afternoon is, as we talk, we're going to lean into that criteria. We're going to lean into that decision-making matrix, and we're going to support each other in that conversation. Advocacy through alignment over maybe some anecdotal information. Really looking at impact. I think that's why everyone's here today anyway. So versus maybe the history of the project or some additional context. Being concise so all voices can be in the room, and thinking progress over perfection. So anybody cannot agree to any of that. We're good? All right. So again, our decision-making criteria, I really like you got some very detailed materials that you got I think is a packet, 4 or 5 pages. This is really helpful and useful as we talk this afternoon, because really what it is saying is, what do we value? What questions are we asking as we look at these range of projects? So in terms of alignment, does it align with where we're going? Does it grow talent? Does it pay for itself over time? Lean into our identity and our partners to the table, as well as a huge one for this council that I've heard repeatedly, and that's around access. So we're going to work mainly from here. I did want to give you a highlight. What are we going to do? Because you received the packet, I believe, and I do want to shout out Budget Department. I think some amazing work, but you received very thorough information that they've done the work of connecting it to Vision 36. And so by doing that, it's like a lot of projects in there, some really good stuff. We've got an hour and 15 minutes. So what does that look like, right? And so do is give you a process here that's going to link into some things. So again, we talked a lot. Every time we get together, I hear a lot of you all talking about your DISC styles. So if you're in D and you're like, when I leave here, I need us to have decided something. All right. Yes. Yes. So we structured in a way where we will make some decisions in this room today. For those that might be more my seat, we got some structure around the process. So we're getting the voices out, but we are moving in an intentional direction. And we're going to, and for my eyes, that hopefully we're working in a way that's engaged and collaborative. I know where to I know, because I know, but
He
we're
has
gonna
a list already.
yeah, we're ready to go. So we did some intentionality around that. So hopefully, but anyone, please pause and we can stop and address it. So first thing we're gonna do, I will walk you through an exercise that's gonna take these 33 projects and pare that down to something that we can manage today. The first thing that we'll do, we will have an opportunity for those projects that kind of come to the surface to dig a little bit deeper, use that matrix to talk a little bit more about those. And then when we leave today, if we can kind of get around that goal, that we've got at least a handful of projects that we can say we're behind these, with the knowledge that it doesn't end today, right? There's additional conversation and work to be done around it. So we
And if I
Jump
can,
in,
I'm sorry.
please. Absolutely, not
Just
at all.
to get this again on the calendar, remember again, what we are working toward is a solution in which council will publicly ask for a vote. You will direct staff to approach the local government commission to start the process for a November referendum. So we're roughly a month out. So as Tiffany's saying, we don't expect, we won't turn it down if it happens.
Yep.
We don't expect this to, in another hour, to have picked the 40 million and the 40 million. This is that initial triage that she's going to start you with this afternoon. And we'll be ready for subsequent meetings when we will get closer and closer to that final figure. But just want you to know that June 2nd date is still what we're working for.
Does it have to be 40 million or 40 million, or can it be 37 and 43? Or
It absolutely can.
Okay.
Yeah, those are just kind of marking points.
And when were we gonna get the information about the continuum, meaning what we're still?
I've got a handout for you. I'll move it around as well, if that's okay. What I'm referring to is, this is a handout that, just for reference, reminds you what is currently available through the 22. This was one slide that you received in a previous presentation, and I just didn't have a better way of doing this, so I just printed out the one piece. So this reminds you that we still have money to be borrowed from the 2022 revenue.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I haven't asked, I saw when a couple of you came into the room wondering were we having a science fair, we absolutely are not. But all these colors will help us kind of stay organized and be succinct and focused in our conversation. So if you worked with this a little bit in advance, some of you may have done check marks. I love it. I love it. I love it. We've got tabs, we've got highlights. I'm excited to see this. So whatever that looks like for you now is, once we bring it into the room, we're going to get on one accord. So I'm going to ask you to do something for me. And with you having looked at this before, on your own, in the quiet for a moment or two, you may already have it ready to roll. If you were making the decision, just you, and we had to say, what are the 5 or 6 projects aligned with the criteria that you would recommend we fund? I want you to identify right here where you are. Circle them if you made a list, highlight if you've got stickies, whatever that looks like. If it was just up to you, what 5 or 6 rose to the top for you as you lay it against these essential questions about what we're saying we value as a city? Take a moment and do that just for you.
So that made 5 or 6.
5 or 6 that made 5 or 6. Thank you, Larry. So we're bringing some clarity into it. So when we say it rises to the top, it is that distinguishing factor. It checks off 5 or 6 of those boxes for you. When we're looking at the criteria, 5 or 6 projects.
We're always doing.
Right here, just for you. And this is intentional too, so there, it takes away that, like, I have to agree, because we're gonna get to a point where we have to agree, but right now, 5 or 6 criteria, your top 5 or 6.
That was your line. I just think.
Is that as I finish them?
Yeah.
Just ignore my.
I need some music.
I see where you.
I did my homework. I wrote it down.
You see it.
Thank
You
man.
have extra credit. I love color coding stuff. Yes, I could spend way too much money.
Too much money in there.
Correct.
like my notes on here, so give me those things.
I'm just looking for my
The structure is just.
page that gives me.
Well. But it's more about.
Can we do another minute?
Right, not your
Just in a minute or so?
Just, that one is again, so I'll get right back.
If you were so.
Oh, it is, it's a different.
It's like 60,000.
Right, I'm like.
Then when the structure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
You get it.
Your top number six, meet 5 or 6 criteria. Dig in as a full group.
Right.
So that's one.
Yeah.
I wanna get. Well, for me, the thing that I'm gonna share with goals.
Are gonna get the budget separated into what, full groups?
That's what I, yeah, that's exactly what I need to make this.
You give me your top 5 or 6. I'm gonna have more than
And
that.
I was thinking,
But I'm gonna do.
The rate is.
I promise. Good.
This is so hard. This is what the voters will also be motivated to go.
Yeah.
and vote for us. That is a component. So I do GOTV.
You know.
So you're gonna get this on the right to make a run.
I did mine too.
No, that's two different ones, so one is the roof replacement for Gnarl, and the other one is the roof maintenance. So we don't have to go through that like maybe there's some.
Yes, they are. So how is it?
I've heard. That's just, that is that maintenance. I'm shooting.
Need to move because I'm sure you guys.
We in a good place, conversation. Good, Mayor,
What we are.
That surely isn't you saving our tree.
Yeah, oh, I got it. Got a part 2. We've got a part 2. I wanna be a good steward of you all's time. We've got a part 2, so you've got some dots in front of you, everybody should have some, if you do not, let me know. All I want you to do is locate your top 5 or 6 projects on the board, they're organized for you based on the lead department. I want you to find your 5 or 6 projects and give it a green dot. That's all we're doing. Find your 5 or 6 projects, so give me one of yours.
So how much?
That
was
was
the
the
bond?
time.
Yeah.
And again, a reminder, this is a continuous process, so some of you
Don't do it.
are gonna go back.
I just
Some of
split
you
them up, right?
will go back tonight and you
Right.
think
Not to-
that is totally fine. So
Not
you
tonight.
can Go back this weekend or you may.
This weekend, yes.
But
This weekend.
for the purposes of this exercise, it really gives us an opportunity to start seeing and digging in more.
Yeah,
Yep, absolutely.
first pass,
That's
city of Green.
excellent way to say.
All right, these are just green.
This is green. Grab your green dot. Come on, come on.
This is the appetizer.
Okay, so what? Grab your green dot. Stacy, and you were talking about. Okay. You had. But I think she's.
Your green dot.
Yeah, we can, yeah. Whatever. Green, the only one green out, you're about 5.
Oh, my wait, sorry.
No, let me hold it. I went through.
Topping off of the hash brown.
Oh,
Make
good.
sure- Look at the vein.
That's good.
No,
Okay.
that's not what it's. That's right, that's my point.
Well, I went to North County, and I possibly.
So, I didn't hear you better.
Wait, did you like?
Yeah, it was delicious.
So it's like, so
It's close down when you got all the money.
Yeah, I need.
Pardon me.
We're all already together. Where you wanna go next?
Yes, yeah. I think I'll keep.
maybe brought them to eat and
Do I can see it still on fire station? Okay, hold on.
Maybe the.
Is, the 4302 West Friendly in your district?
doing green, right?
Yeah, my house got some fire. That's the one that priority one there.
Everybody should have given out 5 or 6 dots if you need more green.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
I put all 5 of mine on that one.
Ready to shoot.
You put all.
What's the fire station? I was just trying to figure out what West Friendly wants to see. if we-
West Friendly fun.
All right.
Oh my goodness, guys, this is not how my brain works, for the record.
Information.
I think the team
Attacked.
They're automatic, naturally or conversely. No, they were.
Yeah, that's how Chris and I.
Just so you know, they are not. That one's wrong.
And we will share.
Use all the dots?
On that side.
Like, anybody wanna have it? No, it doesn't involve it. Oh, I'm sorry, and the sidewalk.
We done with dots. Is there one more? Sorry.
Literally knowing about it.
You're not, you have single people, there are only 6 or 8 workers. If you use the green, there are only 6 trees.
Or 9.
I didn't use them.
People like that. Look at all. Like some of the stuff comes to my face. You're gonna get stuff.
Yeah.
And his account is somehow linked
Yeah.
to mine.
I get my phone, trying to plug it, and I'm like. Right.
Oh, it's his.
Oh.
My
Well,
bad.
y'all don't care about, y'all
Okay, please, the wrong seat for me.
We think jet ski is.
All right.
And they're wrapping up, I'm going to set the stage for where we're going in terms of our conversation.
I had a comment.
Jump in.
So, I'm on MPO and transportation, that there is a potential, I'm not saying it's gonna happen, for many of the transportation, things like the sidewalks and the bridge and the, some of the paving, streets and, by and right, some of that can go through the MPO and the state may pay something and the federal government may pay something. Now, the problem is that everything is getting delayed, especially with the state, because there's no budget and, it keeps getting pushed back and pushed back. So, I foresee that some of those could come under the federal and state, and then we put in like 10% or 20%.
It may not be the full.
Right. And the other thing was, and it's a comment, my observation is that as we are growing, it's just my personal comment. Is that, my comment that we need to make sure we have enough fire coverage for the new growth we are experiencing.
Well, I'm gonna honor feedback and your personal position because I think it will align a lot of where the conversation is going. So you have, yeah, please.
I want to give you, if you go back to the criteria, so
Yeah.
I want to pick one, and I'm gonna do my best impression of Jim Ross. I like to talk to everybody. So,
It's the first time that we're really seeing this on the day screen.
please take that back to the firehouse. But so take Knox Road example, kind of in comparison to some of the others. So Knox Road aligns with where we're going. I think you just talked about growth. Knox Road talent impact is really in that area where we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of development for some of the industries. Physical sustainability. Knox Road is definitely in that area where we're seeing growth, and the tax base is going to continue to increase in that area. Access is going to give access that needs definitively strong fire coverage. Collaboration, I think that's the one with that EMS is going to locate. If you see in your description, if you don't know David Cashwell, he is also one of the brains behind this work and the big packet that you got. So he did a lot of detail to make sure you could see some of those that have strong collaboration. And the chief, how many examples? I know we've got the 7 on Wendover is a collaboration with EMS. There's 4 locations. So again, there'll be a good bit of that funding to support that with EMS, and York County is part of that. And then competitive advantage. Again, that's an area that's highly sought after from the standpoint of us being a competitive advantage, both for housing and for some of the developments that we're seeing in that area. I just wanted to do a quick rundown of how we've kind of processed how those compare based on the criteria. And thank you for highlighting that sitting on the big screen. And this is it looks and feels different, especially when you break down some of the work that Tiffany's done to really draw out what does alignment mean instead of just saying alignment. It means, does it align with where we're actually going? I did it right.
Well, I just want to kind of put in everybody's mind that while the projects we're looking at dollar figures attached here, to go to the future of things we haven't thought of, like economic development programs or permanent supportive housing. None of that's appearing in here anywhere. So we may want to think as we go through our discussions in terms of, okay, it's a $40 million bond and we want to hold out 3 million, 4 million, whatever, go towards those other really big things that we haven't even talked about yet. So I'm just throwing that out there.
That's fair.
To go in the back of people's minds.
That you don't know what you don't know, and as those things are coming up, let's bring them into the room. Because once we get to triage this, both of those are factors that you all have the jurisdiction to say, that's the cap, that's how we want to proceed. What I want to help you do today is take these and begin to pare this down for some more intentional conversation. And I think City Manager Davis did an excellent job of walking us through when we look at how we test that criteria against that. Because even once we take these, which is what we're going to do now, and the dots were a very intentional exercise, because where we want to focus our attention are on things like, it's no need to spend the entire afternoon discussing the Gate City Boulevard streetscape today, if when you all ranked your very top things, nobody kind of honed in on it. Does that mean it's not an important project? Does it mean it might not make it? Not at all. For today, that's kind of where our thoughts are going. Does that make sense? So just my ability to count, I might not be able to do a lot of things well, but I can count, and that's a big one. I would say, can we get consensus? That's something that we
Can
take.
you tell us what it is? Because
I absolutely will. And you're not close to a 9, and I still may have to do it. All right, out of transportation, bridge replacements on Laurel Street, Washington Street bridges over Merle Boulevard. All right, so we'll take that one and stick that on our top priorities. This is actually our highest one. It appears to be Parks and Recreation, Recreation Center improvements. About 5 cast there. Got that later. So it looks like our next tier down would be ones that have 3. So we'll go back here to transportation, and this is bridge maintenance program out of transportation. And I call some more 3. Okay, so our next cluster here around our fire stations, and so that is fire station, the Knox Road, I believe that's it. 3, fire station 48, that's the Vandalia Road location, so do our. And then fire station 49 are refurbished there as well. So I'm gonna pause here, check in with you all. Do you feel like this is a manageable point of discussion for today, or are there any more that you wanna take a step and add? Because if we go to 2, we've got quite a few that got 2 dots, but we'll pause here if there's anyone that's like, listen, if we leave this room and we haven't at least discussed this thing, I'm gonna.
My brain just don't work like this.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second.
I think we did with the 2 dots.
Cause I want to give you something manageable for this afternoon.
The dots have spoken.
If we have
Can you explain what happens next?
Yes, so when we are looking at we're gonna debrief the decision making matrix minute. We're gonna. Hey, it's the dot. Okay, if I'm able to lean on our leadership to make an executive decision, let's stop at this level of dots for today, because I think we have a very important question, which is you giving us some top priorities here. What are we doing with this? All right, can we stop there? We're coming back to these. We will touch these in a subsequent session.
Yep.
As we think about it.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so what are we doing next when we dig into this process? Is discussion. It is discussion. So yes, you got these up. We can, in a very structured way. You're okay? Everybody's good? All right, pause here. You got a question?
If we get through this first group fast enough, can we add more?
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay, see?
Let's do it. If you do, you know your peers better than I do.
So my question,
Yes.
my question is,
Yes, ma'am.
can we not group a few of, because I love transportation together, because, I did mention the potential grants, but that doesn't mean we're getting them. So I think they still need to be listed like sidewalks and hedging and
The sidewalks,
the things that go together under.
Surely, I'll give a counter. If we work kind of with these top priorities. What I will commit to before we leave today is getting that organized, so what you get back maybe in some notes or in our
And
next
some
steps
different,
is doing some grouping so
Got it.
we're prepared for next level. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Got
That
it.
works. I think that'll work. That's kind of in the middle on there. All right, so here we are. Here we are. So again, excellent question. And again, what are we doing and why are we doing it? We're going back. Now is our time to dig in a little bit. So that first layer was just so that we have something manageable to know what we're talking about this afternoon. It would be amazing if we can get through all of these. But we want to start, let's highest number of dots, one project at a time, to bring it into the room for you all to have some conversation. All right. And so our main two questions driving that conversation is to put it in. It is open for you all to have some dialogue. But again, the end result. What is the end result? We want to leave here today with at least a handful of projects that you all can say we plan to move forward with, given the wording right, given the direction to staff to move forward to prepare to submit this for 2026.
Is there also, for things that might not ever make the priority list for this particular upcoming bond, to something where it might be like wayfinding implementation, 6 million. Maybe even an idea of like what public-private partnership would look like to get that done.
Absolutely. So just so you know, like, just because the project may not make it there doesn't mean it dies. So somebody saying, I think Crystal asked this a while back, can we have some information that, you know, are some of these able to be supported by other, whether it's a bond from the federal government or, you know, a grant from the federal government, or, you know, different funding streams or avenues, and absolutely. For example, right now, we've got the transit-oriented development grant that's going on around the depot area along Church Street. So, you know, some of the things can be, and, you know, once we, like, I mean, you just kind of put it in the back of my mind. So wayfinding obviously is important to you. So one of the things that Tiffany is going to go back and start doing is working with GDOT to find out, are there other avenues out there that we haven't checked yet that may be available for that type of funding? And I just made a promise with Tiffany.
So I don't wanna move on, I wanna stay with this thought for a minute, because there have been a couple of observations that have said, well, are you factoring this in? Are you thinking about this? And so that's, even before we dig into this, I wanna go pausing to check in with you about how this framework worked for you to get here. Because there may be an observation that says, this helped me think through some things, but there's some gaps. It didn't account for this, or this was super helpful and I never thought about it in this way. So we are absolutely going towards looking at these, getting some consensus around these, some discussion. But I think what's coming up in the room is really important, because what you all making observations about is even more about the process as it is the actual projects themselves. Any feedback for that? How was this for you when you had to look at this in advance, or even in the moment? Talk to me.
I think that for Vision 36, it's our vision framework. And since, you know, we created or had collaborated around the vision, we've also had to take in some of the deferred maintenance and other things to consider. And I personally feel like we need to be taking care of home, because that has not been a priority. And so that's what led me into some of my decision making, is because the practice has been to kind of really focus on the Vision 36, or the vision of how we want to move forward, the economic development, the growth, but we're not coming back to the center and saying, are we taking care of some of these deferred things that have been kind of kicked down? So when I look at distributing my selections, it was more of, we got to start biting this big elephant in the room and trying to really consider that in our considerations for how we grow, because we can continue to grow, but it doesn't mean that the center has been taken care of.
Can I ask a clarifying point there? So when you say that, do you feel that these criteria only look forward? Do these not kind of tap into the things that might be pre-existing things that you want to tap into needs?
I think that it speaks to moving forward. There's nothing wrong with the vision at all, and I think we came up with a very collaborative mindset of how we want to move forward. But it was before we actually got, had these work sessions where we had to take in a lot of what needs to be done. And so that changed, to me, it changed the concept of what I would prioritize. It doesn't mean that I don't agree with the vision or how we're planning to move forward collectively as a council, but it just also means that we cannot ignore, like Station 48 exists. I'm 54, and it was there when I was a child, and it looks the same as it did when I was a child. So we can't ignore that those type of things we have to address as we move forward with this larger vision, which I think is equally as great. Right now, my decision was kind of driven more on we've got to address some of those systemic things that we haven't touched.
And
I'm
just,
gonna let Larry jump in.
if I can just add, that's a follow-up to that, because that's what I'm really interested in hearing from anyone who's willing to share. Did you have to shoehorn your preferences into the maintenance, or were you able to say, deferred maintenance really does have a physical sustainability aspect to it, or it really does have a, or did you have to kind of say, today these 6 things really aren't working, but I gotta deal with deferred maintenance, and I'll get back to these 6 criteria when the time's right, or none of the above.
I think it's a little bit of both. Like, we can't expand water infrastructure without talking about the water infrastructure that we have to deal with internally. We can't talk about expanding parks and doing more with parks without extensive amount of deferred maintenance that we have. We can't talk about expanding the fire stations without talking about the ones that need to be refurbished. So it's just kind of like it's hand in hand. And when you're looking at something that is deteriorating, that's where the priority comes in. And so it's not that you don't want this, that this is great. Like, I didn't see Randleman Road Corridor as a selection, and I have to be okay with that because I'm looking at some of the prioritized. And I'm talking about on the top priority.
The top priorities.
But I have to be okay with that because everything that I see here is a need.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a,
what I was gonna.
So, I agree with everything that Crystal is saying. And you can see that reflected in what we all pick. There's a lot of deferred maintenance, here. I kind of viewed this a little differently. At this, yes, it's future looking, but let's use Station 49 as an example.
Your station.
My station. Does it help?
See, I switched the numbers.
Mine or no?
So I think that's deferred maintenance. Does that help grow and keep talent? Yes, it does. But it helps our firefighters. Does it open the door to people who've been locked out? I mean, it doesn't have, and I think same thing with Vandalia. They might have been built at the same time. It doesn't have facilities for female
Women.
firefighters. It's not ADA compliant. So that checks that box. Does it strengthen our identity? Yes, because we have one of the best fire departments in the country. So I don't think. We don't necessarily have to check every single one of these boxes. But I think I viewed it a little differently in that, yes, I could fit these deferred maintenance projects into this framework. And that's just one example, but I mean, you can see that this council's priorities are really, we gotta take care of some of this maintenance.
And as a frame, it'll be used however you need it to, so if it's forward facing and that's what you're focusing on, it can be leveraged that way, but if there are things like you need to take care of what's already existing, of those 10 things that already exist, how can we use this to pare that down?
And I don't disagree with actually fitting work. I think my focus was more intentional on we got to address some of these
That's good. That's good. So what I'm hearing also is as we move through this, just having that piece of, do we make room for other considerations, like all of these things stacked out, but was this need a need before sequencing?
I have April, Tammy, you, and then Denise.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree, taking care of home and pairing it with Greensboro, to take care of our growth and to take care of current residents is where we wanna have balance. In an ideal world, if I were queen for a day, these would already be taken care of so that this city could dream bigger, right? If there was something that would take care of these needs and some of the negligence of delays, right? And deterioration over time. I would like for us to figure out, the bridges or that bridge on Murrow, that's the corridor from A&T and Bennett. So yes, does it support our prioritization of going east? Could it potentially, we also have it, some businesses in that area have also made huge complaints. I'm saying I make decisions, for our collective good, but then you wanna give the say prioritize, right? And that's hard. And so I wanna name that, right? Because I think that if I say, what makes Greensboro great, what is extracting what is good out of Greensboro, which is keeping Greensboro green. That feels really hard when we're taking care of roofs and roads, you know what I'm saying? And so I just wanna say, because this is new to me, would love to see if there were other things that would immediate top priorities that might not know about, like I said, with LD. So that we could particularly, I'm sorry, Larry Davis.
What's up?
I'm trying to go. The streets was our first collective. Our streetscape was our first, I wanna say what we first collectively said no to. And I think it was because, whereas we understand that, the impact of those good things, that they would be finite, that they would be exhaustible. Like before we could even get anything else done, we would have to redo them again, you know what I'm saying? And so some of this, historic, so I don't see how we, if this, I think that would relieve some of this decision making, if we could make it, and I know that we have to just do this bond for June, for November consideration, but I would love to see, going forward, more of a scaffolding decision of like, here's 2 years, here's 4 years, and this is how we can get this done in 8. I think that would be more helpful.
Super.
Sorry.
No, you're fine, Tammy, and then you, and then Denise. Anything else?
I think the criteria was very helpful for me, but what it lacked was dreaming big.
Yeah.
And if we don't set aside money for dreaming big now, then we're always going to be dealing with the immediate short term, and we will never have money to start the big dream. And that's, I don't think we have to decide now what that big dream is, but I think that big dream kind of hits all of those, and at the same time it misses all of them because we can't define the answer. So that's what I would add.
I think that, I'm sorry, I forgot. My culminating idea was, after I said a whole bunch, is, to Tammy's point, this is still getting voters to the ballot. And I'm not motivated necessarily to think, when people look at like our needs, like fire and all of those things, people want to see us be creative. I think the Windsor Chavis Noco that bond was motivating. I think that it was a big idea that brought in those partnerships. That was super groundbreaking. It brought in a lot of partners. And to Tammy's point, some of the things that I think we want to do are just not demonstrated here.
All right, you and then Denise.
Yeah, I love Councilmember Thurm's comment about dreaming big, because the part of these, we do have to dream big. I go back to Councilmember Black's comments about looking at that deferred maintenance and making sure we don't forget about it. Infrastructure. Then I go back to Councilmember Parker, when she said earlier, I'm not sure if everybody heard it, but, you know, if this is a bond, if these are bonds, then we gotta make sure that we're delivering for the people. And in a sense, they have to see we have a vision for the future, but also that we're taking care of our stuff.
Yes.
If we go to them, and I call it kind of the straight face, go out and we have these town halls that we're trying to sell these bonds, and they look at us and say, but you have so much stuff in the back here that you haven't taken care of. So we gotta do it all, we gotta find some way to do it all, and that'd be the motivating force, the fact that we're trying to take care of everything. If we just are building shiny new things, but the parks are in bad shape, the water infrastructure's in bad shape, the fire stations are in bad shape, they're gonna say that we're derelict in our duties.
Well, okay, Denise and then me. No.
So, and I won't repeat, but I will acknowledge, appreciate that this council is having this discussion at this time about how do we take care of the things that have been we haven't been able to get to, you know, for multiple economic reasons of the past, and how do we look ahead at the same time? So to build on, I think what everyone is saying, process, I'm thinking maybe what if we, and not to answer today, but potentially agree to a certain portion of a bond side for the dreaming part. So that is just picking up on what has been said overall, but Kimmy, what you were pointing to is we know that we want to keep our debt service at a certain level. We know that we want to, and there's things that have a need that we need to continue to drive. But if we know that there is a portion we can account for, or that we can work towards, and then amongst us, we have to agree this area here, and we are meeting the deferred, that we can start to see those things that are forward looking while we're maintaining or meeting the need for the deferred maintenance.
I whispered to City Manager Davis and said, I'm hearing everything in the room. I'm gonna try to get us a deliverable out of this. And I think that's an excellent kind of suggestion based on everything that we've heard that will align. We can begin, this gives us a framework, but when we've got to make some of those decisions, we've got something else that helps us factor in what you're saying.
After me.
Yes.
Or
I still have a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my comment was just basically that, you know, when you look at these and you're thinking like, you know, renovating or doing this may not fit all of these categories. Yes, actually it does. You know, fixing the recreation centers, because we're wanting families to come here and live. And if we don't have the proper equipment, like in the playgrounds or in the recreation centers or and safe equipment, and very much like the fire stations, if we don't have those properly built and staffed and all of those, that is growing us. Because, you know, you don't want to take your child to a recreation center where you see water coming in the ceiling, or you see mold on the bricks, things like that. So it really does. So many of these do fit into those categories. So I just want to make that statement. And then we have.
Yeah, so one of the things I liked about the LIHTC funding is that there's LIHTC funding for new projects, and then there's LIHTC funding for maintenance or revisions or repairs, renovations or repairs. So is it possible when we're having this bond conversation that we could break it up? Because I really do like what Denise was uplifting. And we do have a lot of priorities that, well, they're all on the revision side, right? The renovation.
You want me to read out kind of what?
Yeah.
Everybody know what we landed. All right. So
I think there's only one new, right?
Getting is improvements to the recreation centers. Out of Parks and Recreation, out of Transportation, it was the bridge replacements, both out of bridge replacements or maintenance in both cases. So again, that deferred maintenance there. And out of the fire, you had a new fire station and refurbishing of two. So on the fire side, you have some balance, and then kind of taking care of what's already in place. But for the rest of this, it is really around maintaining.
And I'm just thinking of how we project this out to the general about what we decide goes on the bond. I think it's good if we say, here are the things that we are repairing, and then here are like one or two new things to look forward to.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe that might sell it, but not, I don't wanna say sell it, but sell it.
For you, okay, just with the idea in the room is making room for both of those things and being intentional about it.
Yes.
In terms of staff supporting you, are you looking for something very objective and more rigid percentage wise, or just a mindfulness that there's a balance?
I think at this point in mindfulness, that there's a balance, and it's, I think it can't be balanced because we really do need the deferred maintenance the most. But we do need to have something to look new to.
I'm gonna interject one more question, because I wanna be mindful of you all's time, and we'll keep having this conversation. Based on where the discussion is going in the shift in terms of that thought process, are we still okay with what we determine here as things that go forward, or is there? Do you understand what I'm putting in the room?
Crystal, for just the first discussion,
Yeah.
not forever, just the first discussion.
I want to make sure if we didn't have anything else,
Yeah.
we know what's going on there. Okay,
Crystal,
back to you, Ma'am.
Two things that would help me. What we haven't had are details about the transportation piece. Like, what is the bridge about to collapse? Or are we doing, what's? But I think it's important to know what state we're talking about when we're talking about sidewalk maintenance. What does that mean? Cause I saw sidewalk installation and I saw sidewalk.
Yeah.
A little bit more definition about that, more speaking to the bridge, life of the bridge. But also I still would like to see out of these projects, which ones have potential for other types of funding.
That's right.
Because that also will weigh in for me. If there are other opportunities for seeking funding for streetscape, then, maybe should be as prioritized as something else. So they kind of are all on the board. All of them are equally important as far as I'm concerned. But if we have other avenues of getting them funded through grants or whatever it is, it may weigh differently than me for something that just has to come out of this fund.
We're taking lots of those.
Is there a reason, and I think Crystal just spoke to it a minute, that bridge, like we've got two categories.
Right.
Maintenance, and then like full on, I guess, tearing it down, building it new. Same thing with sidewalks.
Yep.
Sidewalks, we had maintenance, we had new. Why isn't that grouped together as just sidewalks? Yeah, maintenance, repair, replace as one line. Why are we differentiating between kind of the new piece or the full on repair versus the maintenance piece?
Councilman Markle, if I may, I think from the sidewalk perspective, we certainly could look at grouping it. From the bridge perspective, we just wanted to separate out past Orland, Washington, because we've had recent closures there. We do have 8 other bridges as well that are in the top 10 bridges with the highest maintenance costs right now, and the most maintenance that needs to be done for repair. So that's kind of why we separated that. Yeah. The other thing is that in terms of bridge maintenance, our reports from studies show that we have total dollars in needs for bridge maintenance.
You asked.
I'm just being.
Sammy, did you have a question?
I just wanted to kind of get some idea here. I added up those 6 projects, based off of the cost projections, and that's at 31.9 million.
We got change left.
We have either money ultimate or to dream, but I'm with Tiffany on let's pushing forward with these 6, and then the next time we meet, we'll push on to others.
Good idea.
And not to belabor the point, but just to feel good about it, does there need to be any discussion? Because that was a part of the process, that if you needed to bring anything in the room on these, or we feel good about these, that's tier 1, we're good.
I have discussion. When we come back,
Yes, ma'am.
The parks is 7.5 million. I
That
think,
top one,
isn't it?
That's
2.5.
Recreation centers.
Then we have more than 31, because I wrote that down as 7.5.
2.5, 2 million, 3 million,
5 million.
We have another, okay,
10.4, 4.5, and another 4.5.
okay. Then, anyway, the same question, is I would like to see more detail on those parks in terms of what are we fixing at those parks, because we may take something out of that and do the, if
Something.
might do another, put something other from the Parks and Recreation Board, slot that into that.
Right.
Or something like that. It would be helpful next time to have more information on exactly what are we talking about by park and what are.
And we hope that it's excellent.
Well, that'll really fall back to you to make that determination, whether it meets your sense of.
Where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So our priorities of the Vision 36 was, building east. Growing our open core. What was the other one? Urban core, the east. What was the other priority? There was one more.
Mentioned airport, I don't know if
The
that.
airport.
It's just housing.
Innovation or something.
Why I'm saying that is because we were coming, and I think with historic, there's an area that has historic divestment, and then, yes, we think about what new industry is coming. So they're gonna look for the robust downtown. Is, gonna grow our tax base, that is gonna take care of the city as a whole. So that, I think to your point, there is like, what takes care of the city as a whole? But then also maybe heals some of the things that have been historically neglected and harmed. So it's a both area. So yes, I would just advocate to say that downtown is still part of that Vision 36 from this council.
I just would like to give you all kudos, because I think working through things like this sometimes when it's new, and then even if new and all those things, trying to figure out what it looks like, but I think this was a really good illustration of trying to connect the work you've already been doing to where you're going. And so just.
This was the hardest work session on the record to date, in my opinion.
Well, no,
This is good.
I have to think about that feedback.
No, you take a break.
But I would say on the cusp of feedback, my last pitch is that if you have an opportunity to share with our leadership how this was for you, continues to unfold, if there's different data that you need or whatever, we want you to feel like you got what you needed out of the session.
You did wonderful.
We're not shy.
And I love that.
You're great, you're great.
Thank you.
For the number crunchers, going back to the comment about scaffolding, remember, you do have the option to think about this as multiple revenue. At 26 and 28 and perhaps even future, so don't feel like your conversation has to stop at 40 or thereabout.
I have one more question. For me, is there are a couple like engineering inspection items that we're at risk of losing buildings if we don't do them. And if we don't do something with this roof in the next 3 years, we're losing this library or we're losing this building. We need to know that. If you could give us that feedback.
So along those lines, for instance, the roof at the Cultural Arts Center has leaked. And it's gonna be degrading the entire building if we don't.
Well, we've got the same thing at Hemphill Library.
And the library and,
But we've also not charged rent.
That's what I was just gonna say.
agreed, I know all that. I'm just saying, we need to know how bad they are until we get to a point where it's so bad, we can't do anything. That's what I think.
I think that's how critical is service.
This is for LD.
You've done it now.
You started
So some of these things that didn't get hit, the twos, is all of this contingent on bond? Meaning, do some of these make their way into the budget in other ways?
I think that's what.
Especially some of the park stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that was the question, what other options will we have?
Like, this doesn't mean they're dead.
Right,
Okay.
right, absolutely,
One.
yeah.
Right,
So,
right.
Thank you.
Right, so you got.
I don't even know that these are your picks.
Yeah.
These are just the early leaders, right?
And I think, I'm acknowledge, Councilmember Parker mentioned this earlier, and it may have kind of slipped by. One of the deliverables in Vision 36 is we need to lean much harder into public-private partnerships.
Yes.
I mean, so when you talk about facilities like the Cultural Arts Center, which provide support for external partners, I mean, that would be an ideal location for something like a public-private partnership. And I'm not only isolating us to that, but I think it gives you a response to your question. Yes, we're consistently thinking of how do we do some of these things outside of this particular funding stream. So, I would say,
Done?
We could go on if you want.
No, that's okay. It's not quite all right.
Yeah, I mean, I would be good going for it. More further. I think to like, everyone's looking at me, it's Friday at 4:30, but we don't have to be here to 5:30, so like at the moment.
So I think personally, I think taking it all back and then coming back to see what we have left in the ways of monies that we're talking about and all of those things, my opinion, but I'll leave it up to the group.
That's fine.
And we don't really need to we can't take a vote, but we can
So-
at least express our opinion.
but Mayor Pro Tem, do this for me. Because I know you have some thoughts on this. What are you thinking of? What are 3 top things you want to see me and the staff bring back into this scenario?
So I think what could be helpful, just based on the conversation we've been having, have these items similar to the grid that you have, but cover for some of the pieces that have brought up. Is there grant funding that can be available? Is this ideal for private partnership? Are there other sources of funding?
Right.
And just sort of put that across, and then and I don't know if we can list this out or not, but the aspect that is the things that are new versus maintenance, for us to, that's probably hard to list, but at least give us a target, like a number, like a percentage or a number that we would work towards.
Yeah.
And work with you all towards. I think that if we could have, because that's what I was sort of hearing is there's comparison pieces here that it's sort of an if-then statement for each of the items. I would go with that if I knew that this, but I would take that off if I had this.
Right. I just want to, I'm sorry, are you done?
Yes,
I just want to be careful because like I said earlier, some things can be potentially with a grant, be done with a grant, but yet we can't bank on that yet because we don't know.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of my concern.
The potential for it, I think, is what we're looking at.
Right.
There's some things that we're gonna have to pay for.
Right.
Bottom line. And so that would be a different category than somewhere where we know there's access to other funds, whether they're in queue or not, there's still that opportunity.
Live.
Right, or if it's a public-private partnership, there's opportunity there that I think should be incorporated into the thought process. But there's gonna be some clear black and white things that need to happen within this conversation that we can go ahead and say, we've gotta commit to that.
And maybe asterisk the ones that are safety concern.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
And there's some debt that we can take on that just is decided, right?
Those are
Yes.
limited obligation bonds.
Yeah, you can.
So just, there's that.
Maybe one final comment, that's okay, as you go through this, some of you use the phrase dreaming big. As you think about that, remember that when the time comes and we go on the referendum, we have to give it some kind of title. We have to give it some kind of group. As much as I would love it for just to say $5 million so we can dream big, it's gonna be so we can. or so we can dream big about parks and rec, or recreation. So just think about in what area of the city do you want to do your dreaming next? And you can start structuring how we would write that as a
In
bond.
our economic development, I mean, we've had
Exactly,
general
yes.
bonds before that, yeah. That
Public
could
safety,
fit under a
transportation,
umbrella.
housing.
Can I throw out one other thing?
Sure.
One other thing for us to think about, I think. It wasn't sexy, I don't even know if it has any dots on it. Was traffic calming measures in neighborhoods.
Right.
Because that's one of the biggest things we hear from
Speeding.
our constituents. And it's really didn't fit any of the, like deferred maintenance or anything, but it's something that I think the public would feel an impact from, and I think in my mind, that's gotta be,
Yeah.
we need to at least think about it and agree. Not put it in if we're not gonna put it in.
Right.
We need to talk about it.
And we need to talk about
I
it.
think that what the delay around those things are, it's like, I don't wanna pay for another study, I don't wanna pay, you know, when you have
Yes.
such urgent needs. If there's already a plan that we can pay for and pull the trigger on, I'm ready to do that. But another plan is not something, you know, if that's what it consists of to make it happen, that can't be a priority right now.
Got it.
I don't think.
Everybody. All right. Mr. City Manager, anything else?
This is it. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
I would accept, I would accept the motion to adjourn, so moved by Hugh Holston, do I hear a second? Don't even need,
Tammy, that was hopeful.
vote.
Tammy said it wasn't a plan, it was installation, y'all. Crystal, if you wanna round it out, that's what Tammy Sticker was